Okay, so today I've called this Who is This Really? And what you see is a whole group of aliens. And so what I'm going to be talking about this morning, not that I don't believe there's aliens or that people are not telling the truth, but I will be talking about what may be going on. And I'll give you the reason I got this sort of idea in my head. Hang on, what's going on here? Phew. Okay, this is a friend of Desta and ours, Rob Freeman, and he's famous for the blindfold reading stuff. And I've on my White House UFO YouTube channel, I have a number of interviews with a lot of the trainers around the world who do this blindfold reading. And the whole point of this thing is if you've got a blindfold on and they can put this thing, you can sit on it, you can put it behind your head, on top of your head, in front of you. The person has this 360-degree vision that they can tell you what color something is, what is on a piece of paper, writing and stuff like that. And the whole point is who's actually seeing. And so we sort of assume that what we see is actually real. And when you put the blindfold on, then you realize this thing about seeing and what's actually coming to us is much more complex than what you'd think. So that's the start. Now, what I'm going to look at today is who are we dealing with, why are they here, and what do they want us to know? And I go back to, I was telling you yesterday, I was talking about lucid dreaming, that we are actually in a dream. We don't realize we're in a dream, that when we die, we're suddenly going to realize we're a ball of light, we're part of the one, and that we were playing a puppet and that we were playing this game and learning lessons or whatever, and then we're back in. Now, the lucid dream, I tried it for many years. I could never get it to go except one time, and then I sort of messed it up. But anyway, what happens in lucid dreaming is what you have to do is you got to pick up the dream sign. So in your dreams, your right brain is basically running the show. So you're going to get a lot of symbols. It's going to be that's in contact with the field or wherever your mind is. It's not in the brain, but it's outside, and it's putting this stuff in, and you're having these dreams with various symbols. And what you'd have to do to become lucid is you got to pick up what's called the dream sign. Now, what I'm going to say is that in a lot of the paranormal phenomena, you're going to find these signs that indicate I think are there to indicate to you there's something more than what you're actually seeing. So what you would do, and I said my dream sign was always my father would always appear in my dream. My father's been dead since 2006. He would appear in the dream, and I kept saying, like, why can I not pick it up? And what's happening is your left brain, your rational analytical brain, is the one that's actually picking up and saying, hey, this is my father's dead. This can't be a dream. This has got to be a dream. And then suddenly, as soon as you realize you're in a dream, you become lucid, you wake up. And that's why the main lesson I say in life is remember who you actually are. That's the dream sign. You are not the puppet on the stage. So let me give you another example. This is my grandfather. And when my father died in 2006, about a day or two before he died, my grandfather came and was in the room. And I told my mother this story. He told my older sister this story. He never told me the story. But the basic theme of this story is what if my grandfather had lived 100 lives or 1,000 lives, why did he come as my father's father into the room? And the answer is because if he came as anything else, he can appear as whatever he wants. But if he appeared as anything else except for my father's father, my father would have said, who's this guy in my room? Like, what the hell's going on here? And it means something. That's why you can appear as whatever you want. And I think in a lot of cases, what's happening is that the phenomena that we're dealing with is using these dream signs. One of the examples I can point out is that Desta and I dealt with Chris Peters, who is the stepson of Barbara Streisand. His father is John Peters, who was Barbara Streisand's hairdresser. And then they had an 11-year, they lived together for 11 years. And so Chris is the son of the father, and the father went on to be the head of Columbia Pictures. It was a total sort of moron. But Chris is a full-blown experiencer. And what he told me is that what he was told is that when we come into your world, we can do whatever we can, appear as whatever we want. And what we do is we go into your head and we see what's in your head. And it is whatever is in your head. That's what we use to teach you a lesson. So if you're very spiritual, they use a spiritual thing. If you're in fear, they're going to use fear. They'll use whatever is in your head. And they said to Chris, we have no other choice. We can only use what's in your head. Now, this this is the next story I want to tell, which I think is a very interesting story that shows the same sort of thing, that this is used across all sort of paranormal phenomena. Now, this is a book I always recommend that people read. It's called Journey of Souls by Michael Newton, and he discovered this whole thing about lives between lives. And what he would do is he had 7,000 clients. He would regress them into their last lifetime, and then he would take them through the tunnel, and they meet their uh, family, and then they meet their soul guide, and then they go in front of the life review and all this kind of stuff. And he would do this whole thing with 7,000 people and put this book out as what happens between lives. In one case, he has a guy in his room, and this guy was a fire and brimstone preacher from the 1920s. So what he does is he lets this guy die in his last lifetime, and then he comes forward, and all of a sudden the guy starts freaking out, and he says, "Oh, I can't believe it! The devil's in the room! The devil's in the room!" And he's sweating, and Michael Newton saying, hang on, calm down, calm down." And he's got Kleenex, and he's wiping the guy's face, and he said, hang on. What do you mean the devil?" He said, "Yeah, he's here." So let me read the page, and because this is one of the best examples that shows how this works. So Newton says, "Tell me exactly what you see." And this minister guy is whispering, "A being, a demonic, reddish green face. He's got horns, wild eyes, fangs. The facial skin is like a charred wood. Oh, sweet Jesus, why of me of all people who spoke so much in your name?" And then Michael Newton says, "What else do you see?" He says with loathing, "What else do I see? What else? What do you, don't you understand? I'm in front of the devil." And then Michael Newton says, "I mean the rest of the body. Look below the head and tell me what you see." And then the guy says, "Nothing, just a whispery, ghost-like body." And then Michael Newton says, "Stay with me. Doesn't it seem unusual to you that the devil would appear to you with no body? Move forward in time rapidly and tell me what this figure does." And then the guy jerks up, and he sits up in his chair, and with a great sigh of relief, he sags into the chair. "Oh, that bastard. I might have known. It's Scallion. He's taking his mask off right now, and he's smiling wickedly at me." And he said, "Who is Scallion? This is some crude idea of a joke." And then Michael Newton says, "What does Scallion really look like now?" And he describes Scallion. "Scallion makes a habit of doing this kind of thing. Why frighten you when you're coming into the spirit world all disoriented?" And the client says, this fire and brimstone preacher, he said, "Listen, he's a great teacher. That's his way. He has got his whole group using masks, but he knows that I don't like them much. Tell me why Scallion used a devil's mask to scare you right after this life. Talk to him now." And then the guy's very silent for a couple minutes, and Newton waits. And then he says, "I had it coming. I knew it. I spent my lifetime preaching about the devil, scaring good people, telling them they were going to go to hell if they didn't pay attention to me. Now Scallion has given me a dose of my own medicine." So Scallion basically appears as the devil to give this guy the idea of what it was like to be in his congregation when he was preaching. And so these entities, if you're in the higher realms, you can come and manifest yourself as anything you want. The last story I'll tell before I get going on the alien part is a story. I had the honor of interviewing Leslie Kean, who is the one that wrote the New York Times bestselling article on the fact that the government was investigating UFOs. She wrote a book on UFOs, and she also wrote a book on life after death. Now she got into, same as Des and I, she got into physical mediumship, and she was following a guy by the name of oh God, I can't remember his name.
Stuart Alexander.
Stuart Alexander. So she's there, and of course, I was interviewing with another girl, and she was asking all sorts of questions. All I wanted to ask is one question of Leslie. I said, "Leslie, tell me, did you actually see that hand?" And she said, "Yes, I did." And she tells a story that she's told a few times. She said, "I've seen it a number of times." So she's sitting at a table, and Stuart Alexander is in trance in his little box, and she's there, and she says there's a red light underneath this table, and then this sort of smoke starts to come up on that table, like ectoplasm starts rising up and crawling across the table. You got to remember, this woman's a New York Times reporter. She's very, very skeptical and very level-headed, and starts to form into this forearm and a hand. And I said, so what do you do? She said, well, I touched it. She said it was a real hand. It was actually a hand. And she said I could feel the knuckles, I could feel the tendons. It was warm and it was soft like a baby's hand, but I could feel all the knuckles and stuff. And she said this has happened a number of times. And then the hand would just sort of melt down into this ectoplasm again and disappear under the table. Now, this is the whole thing. So the idea is, yes, people will say to me, well, you're saying that aliens aren't physical. They are physical. They can come in and become physical like the hand, and then they can go back where they came from. Jacques Vallée was one of the first people that started to question the extraterrestrial hypotheses. He said it's too narrow to account for the complexity of the UFO phenomenon. So I'll give you some of the ideas of the complexity and how I started to look at people's reports. Because as I said, most of the stuff I do is I listen to experiencer reports. So when they're talking about being on a ship or something like that, I ask completely different questions than other people ask. And it brought up these sort of weird sort of things that sort of indicated that there's a dream sign. They want you to realize there's more than just a being, that this is not what you think it is. Um, Valet again says the UFO phenomenon represents evidence for other dimensions. So he puts it into other dimensions. I just don't really give it that kind of definition. I just say it's a higher vibration, a higher realm that is able to more easily manifest and knows how to manifest into the physical world. And it says this phenomenon cannot be understood apart from the physical, the psychic and the symbolic reality. What we see here is not an alien invasion. It is a spiritual system that acts on humans and uses humans. And I would totally agree with that. This is going to be a lot more spiritual than people think. So all the agnostic scientists need to get their suit, and because it's time to go back to church here. There's no evidence of extraterrestrials, and you'll hear the US government say that in all their statements. And people will say, well, they're lying because they got bodies and crafts. And I refer back to Jim Semivan, who claimed that he got a 6 to 8 hour briefing with guys who had a very high level guys with lots of security clearances, and they had they had free escort badges for the CIA, so they could go inside the CIA and wandered around. They didn't need an escort. So these very high level people, and this is what he was told they had bodies and crafts. But what he says is because you have bodies and crafts, that doesn't mean you know what's going on. It sure you have a physical being there, but the question is, who is it actually to extraterrestrials? So the government statement, they're parsing words. They're saying we have no evidence of extraterrestrials. They're not saying they don't have bodies. They're just disputing the extraterrestrial part. Okay, so here they are. Now here's all the things, and um, uh, a lot of other people have sort of brought up some of these, but I sort of put a list, and I am putting together a book, which may be a short book, but it'll explain this sort of thing. So the book will be called ETs or maybe not. Now, the first one you get is the breathing thing. So David Jacobs is a regressionist, and he had these encounters where he would regress people, and they would do what he called a mind scan, where the being would look in your eyes. He'd come to within an inch of your face, and he would look into your eyes, and they claimed that they could see what you're doing in the past week or the last couple of weeks, and he called it a mind scan. And every time the being would get that close, like an inch away, he would say, "Tell me, is he breathing?" And then the person would go, "Nope, not breathing." And so the question is, if it's a biological being and it's not breathing, something's wrong. This is like a dream sign. It's like, hey, something's wrong here. Almost like the same thing as if you see a UFO sighting picture and you say, oh, that's a UFO, and then you blow it up and you see the string hanging from the top. You go, oh, something's wrong here. This is not a UFO. This is probably a model. And you get all these dream signs from, if you actually start asking the people on board the ship, noses. They haven't generally, you don't have any noses, and people will have all these explanations for why they don't have noses. They don't have mouth. They only have a slit. So the question is, do they eat? No, they apparently doesn't look like they eat. There's just apparently just goes down into the throat, and then it stops, and they have no ears. And people will make all these explanations about ecology or the evolution. And the whole point of this thing is, if these beings are on from other planets, they should grow the same way we should grow. And one of the things that has been brought up is the fact that they found DNA at the Roswell site, and that the DNA may match our DNA. And that's the thing they don't want you to know, because that blows the whole evolution theory apart. That you say, well, this evolution happened with all these accidents, and then suddenly it happened again and again and again and again, and then that shows pattern. It doesn't show the random evolution. It shows a pattern that beings will appear on all different planets all over the place. That it's a pattern. Aging. I remember I asked Betty Andreasen, who she and her husband Bob Luca was very religious. Her interpretation of all this stuff. She had a lot. She went to see the one, I think, three different times. She called it the one behind the glass, which was like almost like God. She was able, and even the beings weren't able to go in there, and she was able to go in there. And so she had alien encounters from 1946 all the way to, I interviewed her maybe 10 years ago before she died. And so I asked her, I said, Betty, you had this being, you first saw it, and you and Bob both saw this being in 1946. You were a little tiny girl then, and now you're an old grandmother with, kids and grandkids and stuff like that. And I said, tell me, did the being ever get any older? And there was this sort of long pause, and then Bob Lucas said, no, it never got any older, but aliens live a long time. And there was this justification. And if you ask people if they've seen a being their whole entire life, you ask them, did the being actually get any older? And everybody will say, no, it didn't get any older. And the other thing is that when you have a being, which I've found, I always bypass the whole question about who these beings are and stuff. And I just say, what's the name of the guy you were dealing with? And everybody has a single being. So there's a bunch of beings running around the ship or whatever, but there's always one being that the person deals with, and that's the person who answers their questions and stuff like that. And so I ask, and you get like LB, Da, Mr. People always have a name for it, and they don't even realize they're telling you that. You just say, "What's the name of the guy you're dealing with?" And there's always one person, and that gets into the idea: is this actually an alien, or is it some sort of spirit guide? Is it some sort of leader? And I'll hopefully explain that a little bit later, how I got this idea that this may be a some sort of spirit guide, that this is sort of like a setup, almost like the Michael Newton devil thing, that they're teaching a lesson. The aging, the reincarnation thing, that is very common. I think it's 25% of all experiencers, when they answer the survey about dealing with non-human intelligence, will say the being was with them before they were born, was in their last lifetime. So we have this idea of random aliens that just sort of got lost in space and ended up on Earth. This destroys that. I mean, if beings are in your last, the same being is in your last lifetime, then you got to really reconsider as to what's actually going on here. Is this just beings here to explore planet and explore our DNA and all this kind of stuff, or is it something much more complicated? And this reincarnation thing just blows it all apart. If people are, and that's the same with Chris Bledsoe in his regression in 2008 with a guy who was associated with Michael Newton. He asked Chris. Chris was freaking out, and he said, "Look, let me ask you, like, when did you first meet these guardian beings?" And he said, "They've been with me since before I was born." And you can remember Chris Bledsoe was a deacon in a very strict Pentecostal church. I mean, he didn't believe in reincarnation and that kind of stuff. He said, "They've been with me since before I was born." And then the regression says, "Like in your last lifetime?" And he said, "Yes." And then the regression went on. If you look at the next one is the belly button and the nipples. If you look at the alien autopsy, this is this famous controversial film that apparently, according to the producer, said that the film had sort of fallen apart, the original film, and that they reconstructed the alien based upon this film. So the claim was, yeah, the alien was a model type thing, but it was based on this actual alien. So the guy that built the model is all, laughing that he took everybody for a ride. The thing is, if you actually look at the being, you'll see it doesn't have sex organs, it doesn't have a belly button, and it doesn't have nipples. So if he's going to make it as a being, why didn't he put the belly button and the nipples? And to me, I would say it's because the original film didn't show that, and so he built it according to the original film, because he would have frames of the original film and it had to match. And that sort of again indicates that something else is going on. Even if you have beings that are created in test tubes, you're still going to have the cord, and you're going to have to tie that off. The sex organs is one, and people will say, "Oh, well, they got test tube babies and they don't need to procreate with sex anymore." And I say, "Are you kidding? Do you actually seriously believe that you're going to tell me that at one point in everybody's civilization that the 17 and 18-year-old boys are going to suddenly say, no, no sex. We're not going to do any sex. We're stopping sex. We're going to just do test tube babies. This is totally crazy. I have no belief that the sex would ever stop. And yet these beings don't have sex organs. And so the question is then, how do they reproduce if they don't have sex organs? They don't have any toilets on the ships, which means they don't have any waste system on them. There's all sorts of indications that they don't eat, they don't drink, and they don't sleep. And so then you got to start wondering, like, what are we really dealing with? Is this actually an alien, or is this something else going on? And the one that I showed a picture yesterday of Elby, who is a being that was dealt with a guy named Ron Johnson, a Mormon guy out of Utah, and he was an artist, a cartoon artist. So he drew it. And if you take a look, and you'll see a lot of beings when they get drawn, they have basically skin and bones. They're and people will wonder, how does he stand up on those legs? They're like sticks. There's nothing there. How do they stand up on the legs? How do they hold up that head with that little tiny neck? And the key there is, I don't care what anybody says. If you've got just the legs with just skin and bone, you can't move the leg. You need muscles and tendons in the leg in order to move the leg. That's how the leg moves. So people try to rationalize, well, it doesn't have any muscles and tendons, but yeah, it can still move no, this doesn't make any sense. And these are like the dream signs where you start looking at it. And the more you look at the beings, the more of these dream signs you see that basically indicate this is a little more complex than what you think it is. They go through walls, they can appear, they can disappear. They're usually one alien. And these are all these different names that people have. And the fact that they don't wear clothes. So I always do this thing where the first question I ask is, did he have any clothes on? And the person will say, no, I don't think he had any clothes on. And I say, don't you think that was kind of unusual? Did he have any clothes? I never thought of it. I never thought it's weird. I never thought of that. And then the sex organs. No, I never thought of that either. I knew that, but I never thought it was weird. And so you have these patterns that show us that the phenomena, as I say, is going to be 1,000 or a million times more complex than what we think it is. There's something very strange going on. Now, if you look at now, the big hype now is to talk about grays, the grays. If you take a look before Nancy Tremaine, and Destin and I helped Nancy Tremaine publish her first book. Nancy Tremaine was actually taken 3 months before Betty and Barney Hill in July of 1961. She had an encounter with the Greys, and then with what she called a mister. And I asked her, it was a reptilian thing. And then I asked her at one point, I said, "It's reptilian," but she said, "Yeah." And she talked about the child that she thought she had, this reptilian child. And I said, "Yeah, but you saw him on the ship. Was he reptilian on the ship?" And she said, "No, no, he was a human. He had dark hair and he was sitting on a panel board." And I said, "Well, what's he look like now?" She says, "Well, now he just comes as like a spirit thing. I just hear him. He doesn't come anymore." And that's the other thing you'll see with people on that will describe encounters, is that is one being, and then suddenly they meet the other being, and then like they're meeting the Greys, and then they meet the reptilians, then they meet the mantids, then they meet the tall whites, then they meet these people, and it's like, well, what are these aliens doing? Are they shifting people from one ship to another? They're exchanging beings. The beings are exchanging people from ship to ship. That doesn't make any sense. The thing that makes more sense is that the person's attitudes are changing, and that they're part of the experience. So the being changes according to the person's attitudes. And that's where we're going to talk a bit about Mount Shasta and Mission Rama. So I tell people, because everybody in the phenomena, the new people all think that the Greys has always been around. And I keep telling them, I've been in this thing since they invented dirt, and I know that the Greys were not around. The Greys only appeared in 1961. And so you can say whatever you want about this thing, but before that, this is a chart. There's a big book that goes through all these. I've just pulled a couple of pages that show you that the fact that before 1961, there was no grays, there was no reptilians, and there was no mantids. Even the reptilians didn't appear till 1980, and people started talking about it. Before that, nobody was talking. So what you see here in like 1947, a being with large green eyes, vertical slits, pupils, long nose. Then ones that looked like mummies, uh, uh, stocky legs, dwarfs, well proportioned. The one here has a faceplate and a hose joined to the mask. It's wearing a mask. And this comes right out of science fiction from the 1940s, 1950s about space travel with the tank on the back and the mask and stuff like that. And what you see in these things is you get a lot of these ones where suddenly they're talking about helmets. Like when was the last time you heard about an alien walking around with a helmet on? Well, the helmet came out of science fiction from the 1940s and 1950s. And here's one diving suit with a helmet, two dwarfs, a gray jacket with insignias, helmet, carrying an object like a gun. Here's another one, transparent helmets, gas masks with hoses on the faces. And it's not that these people aren't seeing these beings, but the fact I think is that we are part of what we're seeing. We think that there's in this idea of separation, that there's stuff out there that's separate from us. We are not connected to it. And the whole point is, yes, we are connected to this. And as Seth says, you manifest everything around you. There is no other rule. And I think I have a thing from John Mack later that sort of explains this. Now, if you take a look at, I say to the people who are big believers that the grays are what it's all about, I say, I defy you to go to the Mission Rama stories, and there's a lot of them around about what was going on, especially at Mount Shasta in Peru and in Spain, and all these encounters that they had. And I say, I defy you to go and find any case of a Mission Rama encounter, and they've had a lot of them, where there was a gray, reptilian, or mantid. Absolutely not. Does not exist. And this is the idea. It depends how you encounter it, what kind of beings you're going to see. So the beings that Mission Rama actually has, and I think there's 34 different beings that with names that they describe in the literature, and all of them basically look like they popped out of the Bible. And they have the robes, they have the hair, they are, sort of like well built. Like they described to me the Aunt Terrell, who was the other one, looked like a Michael Phelps, the swimmer, very muscular, very tight clothes on with boots and stuff like that. And but there's no reptilians, there's no mantids, and this is the idea that the people who are having these encounters are doing it completely differently. They're doing the meditation, the oming, the prayer, all this kind of stuff, and they're raising vibrations and they're pulling in these positive type beings. They see them as very positive rather than these gray beings, which is what I brought up with Whitley Strieber. I said, Whitley, I mean, you had this very bad you wrote it as this very bad encounter in 1987, your first encounter. Would it have had anything to do with the fact that you spent your whole life before that writing horror fiction novels? And he still loves horror movies and stuff like that. And of course, it is reflective in the encounter that he had. So this is a Dhamma, and I'm going to talk today a little bit about the three big cases. I always say that the three best UFO sighting cases I've ever seen all happened at Mount Shasta, and they all had to do with Mission Rama and their kind of encounters that they had. So this is a Dhamma. This is a 2020 story that I'm going to sort of relate. And I've just sent Desta a video that I've done with one witness who we did about an hour and a half interview with him. And he's lives in the United States. He's Latino, but he lives in the United States. And he talks about his encounter. So that's going to go on my White House UFO channel. And rather than me explaining it here, you can watch his whole story about the encounter he had. And I may put up the other one. There's 10 witnesses involved. 9 were involved in this incident I'm going to talk about. And then this Gerardo, who the interview is going to go up on White House UFO right away. And he was dealing with this Adama in 2020. But the story actually starts back for me with Aunt Terrell from 2014, 2015. And this involved your host today, Paula Harris. And I say these are the two best. And then the third is the 2020 encounter. So Antarel is one of the beings, and we actually had a message. I think I mentioned yesterday at desk. I got the phone call that when I went to the mountain to meditate with this group, they said Antarel said he knows I'm coming to the mountain. I'm supposed to put on Facebook, and there's going to be a program sighting on Saturday night, which there was. This is Evika, who is the was also in this event that I was at. I got a message from her and Antarel after it was over. Ricardo Gonzalez was the leader of the group, and he was doing automatic writing, which Desta was sitting right beside me, and I said, "Desta, look, he's doing automatic writing." She said, "Well, it's just no, he's just writing." I said, he's writing off to the side of the page. He's writing sideways." No, as he's holding the book. And me and Desta are having this thing about how the book, and it was so weird because his wife was holding the cell phone with the light, and he had this little tiny black book he was writing in, and it was one of the most dramatic things I've ever seen. He was moving like 100 miles an hour writing, and so the message was from Antaral and Avika, and they were talking about what had just happened. Now, when it comes to grays, you have this situation where people will always talk about the grays. So I say, okay, the grays, you think that grays, and everybody just assumes, and this is where you can show that this is a mistake. That when I show you this, you're going to realize, oh, it's a little more complex that what are people are seeing. So this is Betty Hill's gray from 1961. Okay, so you take that and you put it with Whitley Strieber's gray from 1987. Now the question is, do they look the same? No, they don't look anything the same. They're not even close. They're completely different. Then you take the gray from the other one from Communion, and again it looks different. And then you take the one. This is Betty Andreasen's gray. Does it look the same? No, it looks completely different. You take Lamb. Everybody always wants to do Crowley's Lamb and say, "Oh, he was a gray." Well, does he look the same? No, it doesn't look the same at all. And then you take the one on the bottom right is um, Yossi Ronen's gray. He's an Israeli experiencer, and he was green. Then you take the one in the middle there. That was from the schools, the Ariel school. That was one of the drawings of the Ariel school alien, and it was supposed to be a gray. And then you take the gray that was from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where they put it on camera, where this is supposed to be a government document where it has this drawing of the gray that was recovered at Roswell. It does look the same. No, it doesn't. It looks sort of the same, but completely different. And then you take this one here. This was Tim Taylor, who was the big NASA guy who talked to me and introduced me to a girl who's an experiencer. He was watching experiencers. He's one of the government people that was watching the experiencers. He introduced me to one of the experiencers that he was in contact with. Her name, uh, I forgot her name, but anyway, she actually was from Manitoba, where I lived. And I've known her ever since. Connie is her name, and this is the being. She said on the internet. She said this is the closest looking being to the one she saw, except hers was sort of pinkish color. And you can see people are talking about grays, but it basically starts to look like every gray will be different. It's almost like the uniqueness. The pattern in the world is not commonality; it's uniqueness. All leaves are different. All people, human beings are different. Even identical twins have different DNA. They have different hair patterns, and they have different fingerprints. Uniqueness is the pattern, not commonality. Here's LB. This is the one that Ron Johnson drew, and you can see here again they don't have any tendons. It's just bones. And the question is, how do you move it if you have no tendons and no muscles? This is Jim Semivan. I think this is the Jim Semivan. He saw the beings he saw looked like the Michelin Man, and he's of course a CIA guy, ran covert ops for many years, and of course his being actually reflects. It had armor on it, like this, like looked like the Michelin Man, but it had armor on it, which would be something that a CIA covert op guy would see. This one here is Tejabar, who is the one that Mark Sims saw, and of course you say, well, it's a gray. Well, if it's a gray, it was around and in South America 4,000 years ago. He told Mark Sims definitely he was not a gray. He was a human being who had elevated his spirit and had now come back to help. But he had not had a life since 4,000 years ago, and he lived on Earth. He was not an extraterrestrial, and yet we put him in the gray category. When I have interviews and I encounter people who have beings. This is a being that's called Chan. carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. It doesn't want to be known as like a human. They call themselves the beings. They don't have any faces. They don't have any ears. They don't have any hands. They don't have any feet. And they just sort of appear this way. And the one woman, there's two of the women that have contact. The one can see it and the other woman can't see it. She can contact with it, but she can't see it. The one woman can see it. And this is the way she was drawn. And they're little tiny things, only about maybe 6 inches high or whatever. So of course at one point they said, the beings would like you to interview them. And I said, oh, great, let's do this. So the woman goes into trance and I talk to the beings. And of course, I said to them, the first question is, because I'd already picked up this thing about, are these things extraterrestrial or are they not? And I said to them, I said, so you guys extraterrestrials? And they said, would you like us to be extraterrestrials? We could do that if you want. We could even take you to our planet. But no, we're not extraterrestrials. We've always been here. You're the visitor. And this comes to this concept of, is there time and space? If we've always been here, then you have the idea they're hiding under the ocean or they're on the earth, or are they all inside? That is all one thing. And it's a singularity. And we're going inside ourselves to actually encounter these beings, that everything is in this oneness of a singularity. So that's what they said when I asked them about extraterrestrials. A lot of beings will say to the people say, well, where are you from? And they'll say, you wouldn't understand. So if they're from another planet, what is there not to understand? This sort of indicates that it's much more complex than what we think, that it's not necessarily from another planet. This is Nancy Tremaine. I asked her, I said, ask your beings, are they extraterrestrials? And this is what she told me. She said, they told me we are not alien to this planet or any other planet, as we have always been here. And this is this idea again, either they're here on Earth hiding somewhere, or there's this singularity thing that everything is here and now, and there is no out there, which is what that Jim Semivan said. He said, there does not appear to be any there. And I always say to people, okay, he had the 6 to 8 hour briefing on UFOs. He knows exactly what's going on. What does he mean when he says there does not appear to be any there? You even get these things where in the Skinwalker Ranch, where one of the sightings they had was a dog standing beside beside a fence smoking a cigarette, and you get these really weird things, and you start wondering like what's really going on here? Is there actually dogs smoking cigarettes, or are they? Is this some sort of projection which wants us to believe something? This is Yossi Ronen's book that Desta helped publish. She publishes books through our sort of our little company that we what Desta and I do is when we find somebody who has a story that we think they should tell, and we know that the beings, whoever they are, or I call it the intelligence, they want people to tell the story. So they'll try to force people to write books. If you have the experience, they don't want you to keep it to yourself. They want you to go tell people, because that's what raises consciousness when people tell things. So what Desta and I would pick up, we call the company, the publishing company, It's All Connected, which is this idea of oneness. It's all connected. It's all one thing. And we'll help if somebody has a real good story, and we'll say, have you written it down? No, you should write it down. And then we help them do it, and how to publish the book. And Desta's published a number of books. This is one of the ones she did. And of course, the book is called One, the concept of one. And the being is this green being. And he asks the being, where are you from? And this is the way they described it, which is this same concept. The way you see us is defined by you. When we visit your world, we temporarily have a physical body defined in a certain way, but it is not the only form or our original essence. In our dimension, there is no need for a physical body defined in a particular way as in yours. You share the definitions of reality that are given to you, but you are not yet aware of it. That's where I said the number one law that you have when you leave the room is to remember, who am I really? And this is the idea. You are not the puppet. You are not King Henry VIII. You are not Paula Harris. You're not Grant Cameron. You're not Desta Barnaby. When you leave your body, you become this little orb of light, which is a color between white and purple. And you go back to this essence of consciousness, to the one. You're the spark of the divine, and you are not the body. And you can come into a physical body and take on a body and live in that body, but you are not the body. Here's the this is the story of the Forgotten Promise. This is Sherry Wild, who fought this thing her whole life, didn't want anything to do with this. Actually, tried to commit suicide a couple times to get out of this. She was just didn't want anything to do with this, and they wanted her to write this book about her experiences with them through her whole life. And she finally wrote the book. And her daughters tried to stop her from publishing the book. It was a real horror story of what happened. And at one point, she's fighting with them. Her being was called Da, and she got the book done and took it to the publisher. And Da said he was from Andromeda, the galaxy Andromeda. So the publisher said, "Well, Sherry, you said that the being is a gray, isn't it? Yeah, he's a Zeta. Yeah, he's a Zeta." And he said, "Well, if he's a Zeta, he can't be from Andromeda. He's got to be from Zeta Reticuli. Zetas come from Zeta Reticuli." And she goes, "Really? Is that right?" And he said, "Yeah, that's right." So she says, "Well, next time he comes, I'm going to ask him what's going on." So he comes, and then she says, "Okay, so what's going on here? Are you actually an alien? What's going on here?" And he said, and this is what he said: "That would not best describe who I actually am. I'm an entity on a mission in the cosmos for the creator." And this is the same thing. He said to her, she said, "Well, why do you come as a gray?" And he said, "Well, it's more functional. It's easier to create a gray than a human being. It's more functional." And then she said, "Well, you're so scary. You're so ugly." And he said, "What? You think we're scary?" And she says, "Well, yeah, every time you wipe my mind and I don't remember who you are, and then you come and you scare the living daylights out of me again." And he said, "Sherry, have you ever looked in the mirror?" And she says, "Well, no, what do you mean?" And he says, "Well, when you give us that big smile with your big teeth, we think you're going to eat us." So it's this idea that they can come in, they can take on a body, and then they can go back where they came from. And we have to remember, we are, as I said to Yossi Ronan, we have the same abilities in reality. We just don't realize it. We think we're stuck in this physical world, and that physical world is all that there is. John Mack, this is where this idea that we might reflect what we're actually seeing, and this is why Mission Rama people will see very biblical type people, and some people will see grays. And this comes into this thing: is this fear? Is it a fear thing? Almost like in a psychedelic experience. If you go into a psychedelic experience, very aggressive with an ego, you're going to get into this very thing where you're not going to surrender, and you're going to be in this hell type state where and it's not like they're putting you in the hell type state, you're doing it yourself. And so we can go in, and I've been in that state a couple of times. I know what this is like. So this is John Mack talking about experiencers, and this is near the end of his life. He wrote this in Passport to the Cosmos. He said, "It is possible, as some experiencers believe, that the form that the humanoid being appears may depend as much on their own level of consciousness as on the initiatives of the various species out there, or the alien agendas that are independent of our minds, the minds of experiencers. Reptilian beings might appear to those wrestling with the dark inner forces, be like grays, could come to the psyches of people who are not ready to accept their reality, luminous beings to enlighten folks, and so on." And so this is this idea that we are part of what we see. And this is this idea about with the blindfold reading. Who's actually seeing, and what are you actually seeing? Because you see things that are physical, and we know that's an illusion. Things are 99.9999999% space. And yet we still sort of fall into the illusion that things are space, or that there's even anything out there. It's all just vibrations that are being picked up and being translated into a model of a physical world. But the physical world that isn't out there. It's all just these vibrations of fields around us, and it looks like a physical world. Other patterns other than the beings, where you start to see these multiple patterns. No two crop circles are the same. The crop circles have come and they put them on there, and nobody's ever been caught making a crop circle. And the question doesn't become, who's making it. It becomes, how do you do this thing? This is just amazing. And it's the idea where the pattern is put down to make you curious, make you awe and curiosity, and have people fight. Is it real? Is it not real? How does it built? And everybody's talking about it. And that's what they want. They want these things, people to talk about these various crop circles, and they put them down, but no two are the same. Same as no two cattle mutilations. And all the cattle mutilations, everybody said, "Well, this is terrible. What are they doing to the cattle mutilations? What are they doing? This is horrible," or whatever. And then there was a guy by the name of I'm so bad with names, but anyway, he had the biggest catalog of cattle mutilation sightings, and he came up with the Gaia theory, where very, very strange theory, but he said he believes that this may be partly to do with the Earth. That the data shows that all cattle mutilations are downwind and downstream from nuclear power activities. And they even had when the Japanese explosion took place with the nuclear power plant, they actually said we should now start getting cattle mutilations on the West Coast because there'd never been cattle mutilations on the west side of the Rocky Mountains. They were all downwind and downstream of the nuclear activities at Trinity and Area 51, where they were detonating all these atomic bombs, and then the wind would blow up into Alberta and Saskatchewan, and we were getting the cattle mutilations in Alberta and Saskatchewan. So this was the theory that the cattle mutilation thing was a sign about the nuclear power stuff, and that you may have not picked it up, but there are people in the government who would know exactly why the cattle mutilations were happening where they were happening. One of the weird things about the cattle mutilations, people say, well, they're just mutilating cattle. One of the biggest breeds of cattle is the Brahman cow. And it's been confirmed that not one Brahman cow, there's millions of them, never has one Brahman cow ever been mutilated. And the key is to the thing is that they're considered sacred cows. So you start looking at this thing, why would Brahman cows not be mutilated and other cows are mutilated? This is the Skinwalker Ranch, the reflective thing. During this Defense Intelligence Agency investigation where they went on to Skinwalker, some badass military individuals who were put on the property with night vision to scout out and determine the national security threat of the phenomena. They encountered something that induced so much fear, I don't think their lives have ever been the same again. Now, when I heard about these three guys, I said, okay, so did these guys have guns by any chance? And it was confirmed, yeah, these guys are special forces, military type people. And the idea was, I think I did this one yesterday, is you go onto the Skinwalker Ranch and you're going up with this phenomena. It's what Paul Selleck said, what you take into the darkness, with your co-residents, you will go into the darkness with it. And so these guys come and they're playing Hunt the Skinwalker, and the phenomena said, "Oh, you want to play Hunt the Skinwalker? We love to play that game." And they played the game with these intelligence guys, and it was reflective of these guys who had gone out and killed people and done all this kind of stuff. And suddenly the tables are turned on them, and they're running for their lives. And of course, they put it as these evil. Uh, uh, aliens doing it. And there was one other where it happened in Georgia where they said, oh, these guys were in a portal and they were injured. One guy he had got very sick, and the other guy died of cancer. And he already had cancer, but he had died, and the other guy got sick. And I said, hey, well, by any chance did they have guns when they went into the portal? And she said, well, of course they did. We all have guns. I said, you have guns? And she says, well, yeah, there's rattlesnakes and there's all sorts of stuff around in Georgia, and we're doing these night visions, so everybody has a gun. I said, you don't take a gun to a CE5. I mean, you're just asking for trouble because it's a reflective phenomenon. This is Brandon Fugel, who's a Mormon who has a Skinwalker Ranch, and he points this out numerous times. He said, I have noticed on a number of occasions that people who bring negativity to the ranch, who bring a spirit of contention or negativity, end up experiencing negativity. The ranch seems to be reflective, at least to respond in a very dynamic way to the spirit or the psychology of those who enter. So he always warns people before they go on. When he and his brother fly in on the helicopter into Skinwalker Ranch, they pray as they go in because they realize whatever this phenomena is, it can be reflective. And Bob Bigelow has said the same sort of thing, this reflective nature of the phenomena. I mentioned this already, the Skinwalker Ranch, where they went to hunt the Skinwalker and they ended up walking away. And the other one they were told not to dig. And the guy that was doing the digging, they started digging, of course, because they're not going to listen to anybody that tells them what to do. So the ego says dig, and they start digging. And the guy that was running the Bobcat said, at not one single time when they used the Bobcat to dig did something not happen to him or to the Bobcat. He said it didn't. Every single time something happened. And this is this idea that it's reflective. Now, the mystery of the ships, the same thing happens with ships as happens. You start to see that it appears that all the aliens may be different, and it's reflective of who we are. The ships is the same sort of thing. Now, if you've seen the Skywatcher thing, where these guys are talking, there was just an interview done with the guy who actually started. It was actually a pretty good interview, and he's talking about all the weird phenomena that happens with filming these things. And they've been doing it for 5 years. They've been filming this stuff. He says the phenomena is always 5 kilometers away at least. So they're using, they call it the dog whistle, and they're bringing these things in, and they figure the phenomena is like, it's like a dog, it's just going to come, but the phenomena stays five miles away. And it's the same sort of thing. It's just, you want to play? Okay, we'll come, we'll play. And so they have 23 of these things at one point show up, go flying by at 5 miles away. And the whole idea is it's a game. It's like they're sitting there filming, they're talking or whatever, but they don't come and land. They're playing this game, and they appear, they disappear. And then they take helicopters, and he describes this thing where they're seeing it on the ground, and then they take a helicopter to go chase it. And they said they have never, ever seen anything from the air. As soon as they get in the air, in fact, at one time he said the helicopter was, they could see it on the ground. The thing was right by the helicopter. And he said, look out your window. It's right beside you. And the guy looked out and he said, there's nothing here. And this is the thing, that the phenomena, it has this ability to morph, to do these weird things. And what they describe is the camera stuff does not match the film. And we noticed this in 76, that you take this stuff and you get these films, and then you get the films back and you're all, oh, I want to see this thing. And you look and it's like, what is that? And then what's on the film looks, that's completely different than what you thought you saw. And they say the same thing, that the phenomena seems to change. The one they have, the jellyfish, which I always make a joke of, is the fact that you have the jellyfish. And I say, you actually seriously said it's 2 to 3 meters across and has these long tentacles that are like 5 meters long hanging off it. And I said, you seriously believe they came across time and space in a jellyfish? And this is absolutely crazy stuff. They're just put, the phenomena is just putting this stuff out in to create awe and curiosity. It's playing a game. And you take a look at the 9 objects that they have categorized now. You look at the categories, none of them match any of the categories of the past. And the UFOs are jamming the sensors, so the UFO can stop. And at one point they say it shot a beam, and it actually shut all the 3 systems down at the same time. Well, they're playing this game the same as Bob Bigelow would play the game with the phenomena with the jacks and the balls, where they would put the pattern and then they would leave, and they would come back, and the jacks and the balls would all be in different positions. That the phenomena was actually interacting with them. So these are the ones. They have the Terra, and it spins and it tumbles, and it's almost like they said, it's almost like they say, okay, let's give them 9 new categories, and the categories just keep going, and everybody forgets now about the triangles and the Adamski crafts and the Foo Fighters and stuff like that, and it's just like we just fall into the illusion and start talking about these 9 new categories, and these are the categories, and the only one that sort of maybe has ones in the past is the egg, the description of the egg. But they're, especially the jellyfish. I mean, that's like an obvious dream sign. It's like, come on, wake up. I mean, this thing's just playing with you in terms of producing things that they know you're filming and stuff like that. And everybody's getting all excited about this. But the consciousness of the fact that we are dealing with some sort of phenomena outside the physical world is real. This one here is the story told by Colm Kelleher when they were investigating on Skinwalker Ranch. They had 6 scientists or people, whoever they were, and they had Gen 3 glasses, so the Generation 3 night vision goggles. And this UFO comes up over the ridge, flies right over top of them, and they all watch it with their binoculars as it goes over. And then they write down at the end of the night, they compare notes, and all 6 people saw something different. And you will, I think, with the I'll mention the one with Paula in the portal, which had the same sort of phenomena. So you take a look at what's going on in the past. You see it starts in 1897 in the new 9 categories. You think, oh, where are the all these things from 1896 to 1897? Where did they go? They were here. There was 10,000 sightings in the United States and in Europe, and these things were seen, and they just suddenly disappeared. They just went away in 1896, and they had the lights and all this kind of stuff. And then in World War II, the Foo Fighters. It changes to the Foo Fighters. Then the Foo Fighters go away. They disappear. They don't come back. Then you have the first sighting, which is not a UFO. It's like a boomerang type thing, and that was only seen a couple times, and it went away. And then suddenly they were flying. People were describing flying saucers. So then suddenly all the UFOs started to become flying saucers. Then you had the green fireballs after World War II. That only went on, and the Foo Fighters only went on for less than a year, maybe half a year. The Foo Fighters went on. They went away. Then the green fireballs came in for about 4 years. from 48 to 52, and that was investigated by the U.S. government. Then you had Adamski with the balls underneath. They called them the bells, the crafts with the porthole windows in them, and those were around. And then they shifted over to the well, these again were from the 50s, where the cigar type ones with the porthole windows looking out. It was filmed in the 1950s. Then you have the Betty and Barney Hill things with the windows that are more like the saucer type shapes, starting in 1961. Then you have in 1960s they're dropping angel hair that hangs all over stuff, and this is an actual microscope shot of angel hair, and then the stuff would just melt away. It would just sort of disintegrate. You try to get it analyzed, and before you got it to the lab, the stuff was gone. Then you had the triangles in the 1970s. These triangles started. I saw one in 76, and suddenly everything was all triangles. And that was the vast majority of sightings that the first big NID study did. It was on triangles and how many triangles there was. Then you had this report started to come from me, and starting in 2013, of people flying the craft. And suddenly I've got 3 dozen people who have come to me almost like synchronistically and told me this story about flying the craft. And Des and I put out the book and describing the fact that the inside the craft, people will describe that they can make it whatever they want. They can make it whatever size they want. All people touch something different inside the craft. And so you have like a meme. It's like a dream. Everybody's having the same dream, but the details in the dream are all different. And that is almost like the UFOs, the aliens, all this sort of stuff, which indicates that the mind may have something to do with it, because it's very much like a dream. It's very real, but all the details are different. Um, and this is where, when I heard Lakatsky say that he had the 230,000 sightings that had been done with OSAP, and then he came forward and said, it was like driving a car down a freeway and all the cars were different. And I went, what? All the UFOs are different? And that was 230. And that's when I suddenly realized that in the ship, that all the 36 people had touched something, but nobody touched the same thing. Like some people would touch a panel on the wall, some people would touch a panel along the wall, sort of runs along the wall. Some people would do a joystick. Some people would sit in a chair, put their fingers in the end of a chair. And Chris Bledsoe put his hand on a beehive that was in the middle of the room, and everything was different. And I went, what's the chances that every single person was describing a different sort of propulsion system? And they were all sort of describing, sometimes they had engines, sometimes they said they didn't have engines. And then this thing about the guides, I mentioned that already, where I started to wonder whether there was guides on the ship. And that came from a story with Jim Semivan describing being in the room with the beings, and they were asking him stories. He said, "I don't want to talk about it; still being investigated." And they injured my wife, they injured me, and I want to know why they did this. And he was all very upset about this stuff. And then the guy asked him, "Was there any telepathy?" And he said, "That was the strangest part." He said, there was this being behind me, and it had this guardian type thing going on about it, and it was doing telepathy, and I'm thinking guardian type thing. So I asked the interviewer, and there's actually another interview being taken, and I think they're going to ask him the question. And I said, what side was the being on? Was it on the right or the left? Because if you do the Michael Newton Journey of Souls, you'll see that when you go in front of the council of elders to review your life, how you made out, how you planned stuff and did it or didn't do it, and what you learned and stuff like that, that you have the soul guide. Your soul guide comes in to this meeting with you, and he stands on your left side behind you. So I was asking, is the being on the right side or the left side? And then I realized that other people had told me that on the ship. The one guy, he was a U.S. Air Force colonel flying a combat in Iraq out of Los Angeles, told me, he said, I was there and there was somebody behind me. I don't know who it was. I don't know if it was aliens or it was humans, but they were telling me, go ahead and do it. And I said, I don't know what to do. And they said, you know what to do, just go do it. And he went and put his hands on this panel, and suddenly he was flying the craft. And he said it was almost like flying a F-16 jet fighter. And then I started wondering, and I heard other people that had people behind them. So I went to Whitley Strieber and I said, Whitley, you're on the craft, aren't you? And he said, yeah. I said, people are telling me this story that they have somebody behind them the whole time that they're in the ship. Did you ever have anybody behind you? And he said, all the time. He said, I told you that story. I was at the board, at this panel board, and I was sitting there and I was thinking to myself, I'd love to steal this thing, man. I'd like to get this thing out of here. And he said somebody behind him started laughing telepathically. He could hear this person laughing. And so there's these, you pick up these patterns. The more you look at it, the more complex it gets. And the more it looks like there's something very complex going on here in terms of us, our in interactions with the ships and the guides. You have this whole weird thing. If you believe in the physical world, it's 30 feet on the outside. Chris Bledsoe told me this. Terry Lovelace has told this story. Lots of people have told this story. There's even one apparently on the ground. Danny Sheehan talked about the one on the ground, that even on the ground, it's 30 feet on the outside. You go inside and you become totally disoriented on the inside. The thing is the size of a football field, and it's very disoriented, which it sort of agrees with like a Zendra, where they have this thing where people are sort of sideways, and it's sort of disorienting. And then this one, I mentioned this yesterday with Jack Sarfati talking about the ship, where the ship has not only a mind, it has a will, and it will not let you in the ship unless you have the right mindset. It will not let you in the ship. Um, Lakatsky mentioned the fact that the ship was part physical and it was part mental. And I already told you the story about Jim Semivan with the spirit guide, which got me going on this whole thing about this one being, that there's always one being that the person deals with on board the ship, and everybody gives it a name. Um, this is Lakatsky making this statement where he said, my job is to take highly classified material and move it down into lower classifications. And he puts it in books. And they asked him the question about it has no engine, no wings. Do we know how it travels? And he said, you're going into the further discussion that occurred. And this was in a congressional facility that day on the Capitol. We can't go into there right now, but let me tell you, we're going to try to cover that in the future. It's delicate. It makes what's described in here, the book, look primitive. Our enemies, you can be sure, are listening to this. So they were asking what's inside the ship, and he's basically hinting. He said, I can't talk about it now, but he said, if you realize what was going on inside the ship, the idea that we're talking about here about UFOs being captured and stuff is totally primitive. It gets so weird as to how this thing is really done. Now, I want to quickly go through the Shasta, because these are the three best cases I've had, and Paula was good enough to do interviews. We've got some interviews on my White House UFO where Paula and I are actually at the site. We're actually at the event where this being appeared inside what they call a Zendra, which is we call now portals. They call them Zendras. And there's been a number of these things open, not as many. They always accuse me of making it look like they're opening them all the time, but they have opened a number of these things in the past. So there's three main ones, and I say these are the three best sightings I have that indicate that we are actually dealing with beings, and they're from someplace, and they are engaging people who have the right mindset. And the idea with the Mission Rama people is this idea where you spend a day and a half meditating, and you're sitting in the cold. It's freezing at cold at night, and you're fasting, and you're doing yoga. And I told the one instructor, I said, man, if you had done this yoga thing at night, man, I would have been gone. In the day, it's hard to sort of escape, but I was just about killed doing this yoga stuff they were doing. But they're doing all these meditation, these practices to raise your consciousness to interact with the beings. This is what they do. They sit around in a circle, and then they try to make these things, and then they have what's called a program sighting. If the attitude is right. And Paula and Desta were in an event where nothing happened, and then they went back, and there was a message that actually come from Antarell or from Ricardo that nothing would happen because the people's field wasn't high enough, that they were not doing it the right way, or it was not. And they had the event after that Paula and Desta actually saw the event when they went back to where they were staying. So 2014 is the one, and I won't get into too much detail. This is in these Zendras, they have 7 people are allowed. They basically, Paula is in the group meditating, and this light comes, and it's in the on the edge of the forest, and Ricardo Gonzalez comes back to Paula and says, Paula, are you ready? They want you there. And they seem to indicate they wanted me there when I went the first time. That was where we got the message on Desta's phone that they knew I was coming to the mountain, and there was going to be a program sighting on the mountain. And it was the idea they wanted me to tell the story. So I actually wrote a book about the the events. And I think that Paula and I should do a book on just these three events because they just get weirder and weirder, and they have a lot of effects that people have heard about. So 2014, Paula is in the Zendra with six other people. We interviewed some of the people on the White House UFO YouTube channel. You can see their descriptions, and they describe this being who's very, very tall, very muscular, named Antarel, and they were talking about the event that everybody was getting a different message. Paula was hearing him sort of talk in this weird language. She couldn't understand what it was, and Ricardo's telling her, "Calm down, calm down. He can't talk to you if you're all excited." And people were getting different messages. It's almost like everybody was looking at the same being, but the being was talking in seven different things to seven different people. So that was 2014. Apollo went there, and then 2000. This is an overhead shot. And then we go to 2015. This shows you at the bottom here is the sand flats. This is the area where the cars park, and you can see a circle at the middle bottom there where people sit, and then the yellow circle. That's they have the events where they have the meditations and stuff like that. And all the events seem to take place on this side at the bottom across the field of the sand flats where there are no trees. This is Antarel, and you can see again it's like a biblical type being wearing sort of a lot of them wear the robes. 2015, Paula is determined she doesn't want to go back, and then they have these weird things, and they're you can see that they're controlling the show, as Jim Semivan said when he was asked who's running the show. He said they are, and Paula and a business guy from Phoenix where their phones were ringing back and forth. They were phoning each other, and neither of them were phoning, but they realized that this weird thing was going on with the phone. That all these phone calls were coming in, and at the last minute, they're in a sort of get together, and they decide, okay, we have to go. So they make this long drive up to the Mount Shasta, and this business guy is sitting outside. The event happens again in the edge of the forest. Paula goes in there with her interpreter, which is an important part. And this guy, we can't name his name. He's given me a long interview, but it was a translator for Paula in the thing, and he wasn't supposed to be in the Zendra. So Paula goes into the Zendra, this interpreter who's a Navy guy, 24 years in the Navy, and is an architect in Los Angeles, goes in to the thing as well. And this business guy is sitting back on a chair, maybe 100 yards away, watching this whole event take place. And I interview all the people. What do you see? What do you see? And everybody basically described this tall being that they'd seen in 2015, except people were describing that this time the Antarel was not solid. He was like a hologram. You could see through him. And I said, really? It's like a hologram. And this is this idea that he can appear as whatever he wants. So he's this thing. And then when this translator comes out, I say to him, I said, you saw Antarel? He said, I can't believe it, man. There's extraterrestrials. I never seen a sighting. And that was important. He'd never seen anything. He said, I've never seen anything. He says, there's extraterrestrials coming to this planet. I could see it. It was unbelievable. He's all excited. He's going. I said, so he was like a hologram? And he goes, hologram? What are you talking about? I said, well, people said he looks like a hologram. You can see through him. He said, Grant, look, I was close enough. I could see the lines in his face. It was not a hologram. He was solid. And you also see where Ricardo was with him one time, and Ricardo questions him about being that or a solid thing, and Antarel pokes him in the chest to prove that he's actually solid. So yeah, they like the hand with Leslie Kane. They can come in and appear as a hand. So this is the thing, and the thing was the translator takes this thing home. So you've heard about the hitchhiker effect, where this thing will follow you home. So the translator was the guy that Antarel followed home. And he tells all these stories over a couple of years. When I met him at a conference, I said, so you still remember that? He said, we got to have another meeting. We got to have another talk. He's following me around. I see him all over the place. And he was playing with his car. He used to have his car in the garage. And then his wife would come in and he says, you're Martian guys. You're playing with the car. You better go. And he said, they're not Martian guys. He says, well, whatever. They're playing with your car. And then he'd go to the garage, and then windshield wipers they're going and the car's turned off. And then the only way he could stop the windshield wipers was to undo the battery to stop the windshield wipers. And they were doing all this weird stuff to his car. And you would see him at a birthday party and Anthorell would be standing in the corner and nobody else could see him. And he gets this message to go back to Mount Shasta in 2020. And they give him this thing and they say, Dama's going to come this time. And this is during COVID. And they said, if you can get 110, 111 people, Dama will definitely appear. So they try to get, and they don't get, because of COVID, they only get 45 or 50 people or whatever it is, but they have to go to Shasta. They're given this instruction. They have to go to Shasta and they have to do these three things in Shasta, touch these certain parts in Shasta. And they go, and it's just a weird story. There's torrential rains and stuff like that as they're there, and they fulfill all this stuff. So it's set that Adama is going to come in 2020. So the translator doesn't go back, but the other two women, one was from Mexico City and another woman, they go back and they get these 40 people and they do all the same stuff. They're doing the meditation and doing all this sort of stuff. And then they start having these events, which we picked up. And I've actually interviewed three of the nine people. And they basically start and they say, well, we're Latinos, we're not proud, we don't want to be the center of the story, and we don't really want to talk about it. And then you go on and the interview would go on, and by the end they were all fighting to talk to tell the story of how their involvement was. And what basically happens is the contact event usually happens at the very end. So you're there Friday, Saturday, you're doing the meditation Friday, Saturday, you're doing all this sort of stuff, and Saturday night is when the event takes place. So I'm not sure what happened at the event, whether they had a program flyby, but it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and they have some people staying at the bottom of the mountain. And some people there's only these certain people are camping and they're up in the top. And it's 2 o'clock in the morning and they're having a birthday party and they're sitting in the sand flats. They're out in the middle of the sand flats. And all of a sudden the one woman from Mexico City says, they're here. Adama's here. And he said, how do you know? I just know. I know he's here. And you hear this all the time from experiencers that once you've touched the craft, once you've encountered, you can resonate with it because it has a certain vibration. And when the craft or the being is in the vicinity, an experiencer will pick it up. They'll know that there's an event about to take place. So she says, I just know they're here. And she says, look over there, there's a light on the edge of the forest. And it was the same thing when the 2014-15 Zendra event happened. Everybody said, it's just a campsite. It's just that. Somebody has, that's nothing. Everybody's trying to discount it. She says, no, that's them. I'm sure that's them. Hang on. They say they want us to go over there. And then the people go, we can't go over there. It's as dark as can be. There's potholes and there's really, aggressive territory you got to cross to get across the sand flat. You can't do it in the dark. You can't see your hand in front of your face. And it's just, we can't do that. And they said, oh, hang on. They said, okay, we'll come there. And she says, and they describe I've heard numerous of these people describe this. It was like a herd of hundreds of buffaloes or elephants, boom, 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 and they're coming across the sand flats. And of course, these nine people start to freak out. And they're going, "Oh my God, what's going to happen?" And they get in a circle and they hold hands. And then they said suddenly they're levitated into the air and they're up in the air, and the beings are there, and they start oming. They don't know what to do, so they go om, and they're oming away, and they're holding hands, and then the beings start to om, and then they said, and it sounded like we were underwater. And I go, underwater? That's a Zendra. I didn't say to them, but you hear this description that when you talk inside a Zendra, it sounds like you're underwater. And they said, sounds like we're underwater. And it was really weird. And we're there, and we're levitated, and these beings are there. And then I remember I asked the one guy, I said, so what do you look like? He said, and he describes the Dama, with the hair and stuff like this. And I said, there was other beings? He said, yeah, a couple of other beings, but then there was these etheric beings. And these are like where you actually are. An etheric being is the real body. And these etheric beings, I said, well, so how many was there? And he said, I remember him saying, there was as many beings as there was trees in the forest. And I said, that many? He said, yeah, that many. And then this interview that's going up on my White House UFO channel is the second guy, Ricardo Gerardo. And here's some of the people that were there. And Gerardo tells the story. He has another event with these, and he describes hundreds as well, hundreds of beings that he encountered. And he was not one of the nine, but this is the guy that told me there was as many beings as trees in the forest. And this is Gerardo. This is the interview that's about to go up. It's a fascinating interview where he makes this description of his encounter. And the thing about his encounter was the idea of Shasta is that they wear robes and they live underneath the mountain in a Telos, in a city called Telos. And I was there when there was an encounter where there's an experience where all the lights lit up on the mountain and Enrique Villanueva was coming out of the outhouse after he's playing on his phone for 2 hours because he suddenly got 5 bars of signal and he was on his phone and he came out and the whole mountain was lit up and he went Telos and he was trying to find his camera to photograph this, all these lights on the mountain. And he got a few. We have it in one of the books that we did, but it wasn't really that clear. But so the beings that Gerardo encountered were the beings that were connected to the mountain. And when I asked him to describe, he said they had white robes on. And I said, white robes? And he said, yeah, there was, I think he said there was 6 of them. And then there was all these other etheric beings, like hundreds of these etheric beings and stuff like that. And you'll hear it on his interview. He tells his story about his involvement with this whole event. And so this is the important part. So when he said, and I didn't realize this, that there were white robes. I said they had white robes on. So they're doing this event, and this is called a rose ceremony, and it's like a meditation type event. And they're doing this the afternoon before the night when they had the birthday party. So this is in the afternoon, and they're having this rose thing. And the one woman from Mexico City has got the camera, and she asks telepathically. She said, "Can we tape this?" And then she gets the message, "Yeah, you can tape it." And so she tapes, and they don't even realize this is on the tape. So they're photographing these people, and it actually looks like they have rose petals, like cut out of red paper, and they're all over these people. And it looks like a scene where everybody's been shot. It's a weird looking sight. But what you see in the background is you see this white robed figure in the background. And they didn't pick this up until later. They thought there was a UFO. And then it was a guy from Chicago, Jan Yonder, who picked it up. He said, no, that's a lens flare, but look at this. What is this? And they pick up this I'm going to show you the video in a second, but I will show you. So you see the tree there, and the being is on the tree, close to the tree on the left there, and you'll see no shadow on the trees behind it. So it's there, and the film is about 1 minute and 20 seconds. So they ask permission, can we film? And they film these people lying on the ground, and they pan the camera around, and they pick up the sun, and that's when you get the lens flare, and then they rotate it back, and when they rotate it back 120 seconds later, you pick up this being again, and it's moved to another tree, and you see that if you look at it blow up, you'll see in front of the tree, it's almost like there's something wrong. It's like a portal or something in front of that tree, and you see the shadow on the thing behind it. So this picks up. And so when he said the white robes, I said white robes, and it's almost like they put this in there. They knew this would be in the film. They allowed them to film, and it's the old idea where it's like the UFOs are 5 kilometers away. They're showing you, but it's a breadcrumb. You can't really prove it. They're giving you something. They're making you think, but they're not giving you the actual proof. So here's again, this is one of the photographs. You can see the being on the far end there. And again, if you're up there, there's not many people walking around there. You're up, and it's 4,000 feet up on the mountain. So here's the video. So they ask you, see the video starts, and they're panning, and it starts there, and they're going around, and then they'll pick up this lens flare, and that's what gets everybody all excited until Jan Yonder picks up the fact that there's this hooded figure. I cut part of it out, so it's panning back. It pans back, and the figure has actually moved. There's the figure again, the hooded thing. So I was very excited when he talked about these people in white outfits. And here you can see the being is a real blow up. You can see the being in front of the tree. You can see this, whatever it is, like a portal or something in front of the tree. And there was one up above too. We took a lot of things, shots of it, and there's all sorts of these weird things that appear around that being. And it does look, everybody thinks it looks like a woman. It appears to be a woman, and very, very strange. So this guy, Gerardo has never had a sighting. Same story, has never had a sighting in his life. And suddenly he goes home, and this thing follows him home. This encounter follows him home. This is one of the pictures he took of whatever it is through one of his rooms. He said he can engage this thing anytime he wants. He takes people to the mountains. Anybody wants to go to the mountain, they can maybe drop their name, and I will pass it on to Gerardo. He goes, I can't remember what month he goes, maybe September or something like that. He goes there a number of times, and he takes people to the mountain. So if you want to have this Shasta experience, it is a very weird place. There's Sixto Paz is open to Zendra there. When we were at the bed and breakfast at the bottom, they said there's all sorts of groups who go up there, not just Mission Rama. It's considered to be a sacred mountain, and there's all sorts of groups that go up there and do various events. This again is uh, this thing of the hitchhiker. This is Julia Mossbridge. She talks about one of the alarming disconnecting things about controlled precognition is that even if you don't blend, merge, morph with the elements in a target, they can still feel like they stick with you. And after you're done, you don't properly disconnect. This is not a big deal, but it can be irritating. So you really want to avoid this. It's critical to disconnect from the target. So she's talking about this hitchhiker effect that it will follow you home, and it's this, it's irritating to people, but it happens in everything. It's not just UFOs. It happens in ghost stuff. I think I even have a photograph. Here's this thing where they had the bobcat, and he said, "I will say, the more extensive digging I did, it seemed that without fail, I mean without fail, something happened either to me or to the equipment." This is one of the ones, the hitchhiker. This is Ron Johnson, the guy who flew the craft that drew the LB, this being that looks like stick and bones. He does ghost hunting as well, and he's at a crypt at Price, Utah, and he's yelling at the crypt. And he says, "Come on out, come on out, come on out!" And he's got all this camera stuff set up, and this thing starts to appear. This black being seems to appear on the left side. And he said, by the time he got his camera, he started to take the camera apart. He just freaked out. He started taking the camera apart and to get to run. And he said when it was finished, the whole door was all completely surrounded by this black thing. And he took it home. And again, it's this attitude of what kind of attitude is reflective of as to what you get. He said that thing followed him for 5 years through three different houses. It was like a poltergeist thing, and he couldn't get rid of it. He tried to do all sorts to get rid of it. So you got to be very careful to understand that you manifest stuff around you, and that you can create these effects, negative effects, by how you take the situation. So we have the meme. So I say it's like dreams, abductions, near-death experiences, OBEs. They're all the same thing. But if you start looking at the details of all these events, you start seeing different things like these dream signs, which basically are saying to you, it's not what you think it is. It's making you think. And when you realize that it's not what you think it is, then you awake. That's the whole deal. You wake up and you realize there's more to it, and that's when you learn. The Philip experiment, Desta, I think, has probably written about this. I've written about this. I think we wrote about it in Contact Modalities. This is the Philip experiment in Canada in the 1970s, where they actually create a ghost. They create this guy, they give him a character, they give him a name, they give him a story of what happened and stuff like that. And they start to try to talk to this thing through on a table. They're trying to, and they use meditation for a whole year, nothing happens. And then when someone says, "Why don't you do it like the medium people do it? Why don't you have sing 99 bottles of beer on the wall and be joyful and get emotion going and stuff in the thing?" And they said they tried it, and suddenly the table started to walk, and it started to talk and stuff like that. And they actually were having this encounter with this being that they'd actually made up. And this is this whole idea about how we manifest reality. And this experiment was done, I think, in Scotland. It was done in Australia. It's been done a number of times, where they actually create a figure, and then actually they're actually encounter with it. Good versus evil. This is the last thing I'll do, because everybody always asks me about this. And this is this whole thing where people say good versus evil. And I say, it's all relative, and evil is just separation. And they say, well, they do this, they do that. And I say, well, let's get to the bottom line here. You consider yourself good? Yes. Okay. Who dropped the atomic bomb here and melted 200,000 people in the sidewalk? Who firebombed all the 60 cities in Japan and created a 1,500-degree temperature and cremated people alive? Hundreds of thousands, 900,000 people cremated alive, women, innocent people. Who did that? And I basically say, if you say aliens are evil, give me a call when they drop the first atomic bomb or melt people into the sidewalk and create a firestorm and stuff like that. I will. Until then, it's all relative. If you look back in your past life, it's going to become an event, and it's not what happens to you. You're going to have good stuff happen to you, bad stuff happen to you, and it's the ability to deal with what's happening to you. And in the end, we basically learn from the things that happen to us bad, and you will actually develop, as what's happening in Ukraine right now. You have the situation, you can say this is a horrible situation, these people, but you take a look at how many drones they have developed, how resilient that population has become, or in Canada, when we were told that we were going to become the 51st state, everybody became patriotic. It was like unbelievable. Everybody was like, came together, and it's the same sort of thing. It's the you work together or you work apart. When you work together like a team, then you can win titles. But when you suddenly are in the huddle and they want to call a play and you say, I'm not going to block, I'm going for a pass. Forget it. Don't tell me what to do. I'll do whatever I want. When the team is no longer playing together and everybody's doing their own thing, it all falls apart. So the bottom line, I guess, is this idea. I think I have all that's considered to be evil. I mentioned that before. Is this idea of separation? And Jim Semivan said his impression from what he was told, it's not evil. Valet laughs at the idea. He basically says you're talking the military. You should look looked at by the scientific community rather than the military, because the military sees an enemy in everything. This is Michael. He wrote the Holographic Universe book. He talks about these events that he had when he was very young, where he was demonic attacks. He thought they were demonic attacks, and he suddenly realized when he had good attitude, it would basically go away, or they would hang stuff off the plants, his socks on the plants. But when he was in a bad mood, he would find needle marks and stuff in his arm. And this is a guy that talked about this negativity and how if we basically reflect, and that you have to look at how your attitude based upon what's happening to you. So the conclusion, Bob Bigelow said when he's asked, what's the Skinwalker? What was this all about? He said, it's all about messaging. So it's about games, and it's about gaming, and it's about messaging in our case. Nobody actually got hurt on the property, hurt. What was it all about? It was games. There was instruction through participating in games that we would set up, and we would verify the controls on those games. So he said it's basic communication. That's what they're doing. You know you're more than the human body. Your essence is eternal and non-physical, that you are a being of light. Um, this is coming from another channeler, out of Albuquerque. What does it mean? There's more to light than you can see. There are many vibrational levels above that which you can see with your eyes. Consider the light from the sun that you can't see, which warms you up, can burn your skin. There are many other types of rays. If you wish to think of it this way, you can. Visualize your equipment that you can't see with your eyes. So it's the idea that you are more, you're the essence, you are more than your physical body, and you got to remember who you actually are. The conscious universe is trying to talk to us. Those that are listening, like Paula, Desta, myself, and the people in the room, we are the ones that are spreading the word. Consciousness rises when people talk about things. Each generation advances the ball down the field. Near-death experience witnesses are told to go back and to help people and spread the word of what they experienced. And one of the things I realized that I actually got was the near-death experience people are actually told that they had volunteered for this, which is this whole idea that we make a plan before we come in here, and our idea is to figure out what is our plan and what are we doing it. And that's it.